Están online, ahora sí. Bueno, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias por asistir a esta sesión Seminario de Excelencia organizado por el Vicerrectorado de Investigación. Hoy tenemos la suerte de tener a un excelente ponente. Estoy segura que os va a inspirar. El doctor Edwards, al que ahora va a presentar María José, la doctora María José Álvarez, que es una vieja amiga de la casa y ha servido de vínculo para realizar esta sesión. Aquí hay una mezcla de perfiles, pero creo que es súper adecuado porque estamos ante una persona que casi es un hombre del Renacimiento, ¿no? Innovador, artista, científico, matemático, ingeniero, que ha dedicado su vida también al ámbito de la salud y realmente es una de esas personas que merece la pena escuchar y que nos va a enriquecer a todos. Así que muchísimas gracias. María José, te paso la palabra.
Maybe we can sit down already. Okay, so buenas tardes a todos. You sit there? Yeah. Buenas tardes a todos y bueno, estábamos contando con la presencia de David en Madrid. Yo dije, bueno, esta oportunidad no se puede perder. Bueno, estaba en Francia y se vino a Madrid y se lo planteé a vuestra vicerrectora de investigación porque el perfil de David es sumamente, bueno, inusual, por supuesto, sobre todo para España, pero incluso para Estados Unidos es muy, muy especial. Como dice Iris, yo lo veo como un hombre del Renacimiento, estos que es muy creativo y que arte, ciencia, todo lo que queráis está en su persona. Okay, so I'm going to switch to English.
Thank you.
And I think we normally introduce our speakers, but I think this time I want to change because I won't do it very well. I mean, I met David when, I don't know, he was doing a postdoc at MIT, and I was doing a postdoc at MIT before him, and then I was passing by, and we met, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago? I don't remember even. So since then, I have always tried to follow his career, something that is not that easy, but he always impresses me. We were just talking about his last adventure. But so I'm going to let him to introduce himself, and then I will be asking questions, but you can interrupt at any time because you will be curious about some of the comments he will make, and I will continue with questions. So this is going to be quite open, flexible, and just to spend a good time together here today. So Dave, I let you to, no, you don't need
So it's just like that. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's really nice to be here. I'm not sure what was said about me exactly, but just to give you one introduction, there's lots of ways this can go. And I don't know you. I hope this is a conversation, and we can talk about my work in different ways. But just at a high level, I've been on the faculty at Penn State University, Harvard University, and twice have spun out companies that I decided to lead. And I've spun out maybe 10 or 15 companies in the last 25 years, but two of them I felt really passionate about, and they both related to the air we breathe. And so I'm an aerosol scientist. So if you think about what am I, I'm probably most easily framed as an aerosol scientist. I studied applied math and wrote a couple of textbooks when I was young, and I thought that was what I would do. I had 5 people who knew what I did. My mother asked me, like, what do you do? And I asked the guy who I wrote those books with, and he said, you do aesthetics. And I really love that, actually. And so if at some point in the conversation we can talk about the importance of aesthetics when it comes to discovery. So what am I mostly? I think I'm a pioneer. I really, really enjoy the sort of the mind frame that you all, the youngest in the audience, have, which you probably are trying to escape. But actually, it's in those years where you really don't know what the future holds and who exactly you're going to become, that you're most mindful and you're listening really carefully and you're really sensitive to everything around you. And that often goes away. Generally, it's really, life is programmed for it to go away. And you become you. But that becomes a lot less interesting. And so it's pioneers, there are some people who just keep putting themselves in this kind of position of ignorance, and then they run away from it. And so I like doing that. So I'm a pioneer.
Oh, that's wonderful, the way you described this, that you have to basically somehow reinvent yourself again and again with new challenges. Yeah. But obviously, up until now, I don't know how many challenges you have confronted. But I was wondering about, and I think you already mentioned it, kind of a major milestone in your life when you changed dramatically the way you were thinking about work, about yourself, and about your career. What was this? When was this?
Yeah, well, there's different moments, and just to say one thing about kind of what you remember about your life, and for sure it's true for pioneers, it's true for all of us really, are those moments of transition, right? It's kind of the moment where you're like hanging on the cliff, and it's like, what's gonna happen? And you kind of made it out, and you kind of remember that moment. And actually your brain is programmed for you to remember that moment and all the smells and sights around you. And so one of the really radical moments for me was as an applied math person. I think, do most of you know who Bob Langer is? Or some of you have. He's come here, and so I remember being at MIT, and I was this applied math guy, and Bob Langer was viewed as not a chemical engineer and not really a legitimate scientist at that time. And in the space of 5 or 7 years, he changed the whole field. And I went from being this applied mathematician. I applied for, I met the woman who would become my wife at MIT, and so I had to get a job and could make money. And so I got a job offer at the University of California system, and that same year the state ran out of money. actually. And so they had to rescind the offer. Like, I'm getting married like in 5 months in France, and I didn't have a job. And so I was introduced to Bob Langer, who I knew by reputation, and I felt like and he changed my life for sure. And he basically, I had done some work in my applied math way, particles transporting in the airways. And he saw that, and so he kind of gave me a few papers on inhaled insulin. Back then, the biggest, hottest thing in pharmacy was to eliminate injections by inhaling insulin. And so to make a long story short, I invented a new kind of particle to get insulin into the lungs with a simple inhaler, and that became a company. So that was pretty radical for me. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. But the idea of an idea you've got that actually investors are interested in investing in, and it was really powerful. And so I kind of took a year sabbatical to run this. And the company sold in a year, and I started with 3 friends, all from MIT, and none of us knew anything about what it meant to run a company. And there were all kinds of crazy things that happened. You could imagine were super stressful, right? And so I'm an espresso drinker, and I had to get rid of my espresso. It was just really amazing. And so that wasn't even not the traumatic thing. The radical thing that happened was after we sold it, actually. And so you'd think, it's amazing, we made a lot of money. Yeah. The first thing I did was I went and bought a bunch of pairs of shoes. So that was like, but I really quickly didn't like being that person, actually. I didn't grow up wanting to be that person, and I didn't like the way I now interacted with people, or people interacted with me. And so I I went back to the university, at Harvard University, and started on the path I'm on right now. So that was a pretty radical experience.
Yes, I was guessing that, because when I passed by MIT, once everybody was talking about him. I mean, I did my postdoc before him, and then I came back, and everybody was talking about you. And they say, because he's writing an article in Science, and he will start a company very soon. And then 1 year later, they say, oh, he sold the company already, and he's going to Paris. So that is amazing. For sure, you are not comfortable in the comfort zone. You are the person that you never feel comfortable when something is too easy.
I'm not sure where all of you come from, actually, but I came from a pretty small place, and it was very modest background, and I cleaned carpets to go to school, and I ended up at MIT. And so I came into MIT from a very different background, and I kind of loved that, actually. I loved coming into this environment where nobody really knew me, didn't have a clue, and I could kind of be whoever I wanted to be. And so that was liberating, and for sure, when we moved to Paris, and our kids grew up in Paris, and I ran a cultural center in Paris that Harvard was linked to. And the company I'm running right now came out of that. I'll talk about that work tomorrow, and I think it's for sure the most important work I've done in my life, and I'm just passionately interested in this. Just really briefly, the idea that all of our mucosa facing the atmosphere are drying out like the topsoil is drying out, and so it's a real big issue. And that idea and that company came out of an exhibition in Paris around coffee. And so we were looking at how you could text a coffee in the form of an aroma. And so I was really passionate around aroma. And I'm getting off the topic here, but if I could just quickly say that one of the most important, so 85% of flavor experience is olfactory. It's in your olfactory bulb. And so you can give to people a really powerful experience of food simply with aroma. A really good example of that is like fructose. If you take a little dab of fructose, put it in the back of your tongue, and then you measure your glucose, 30 minutes later, your glucose spikes. Right? There's no fructose in your body. It's happening through the olfactory bulb, which is like an endocrine organ, and so it like secretes glucose. And so there's this thing that your body has programmed to help you survive, and it's your olfactory bulb. And it's basically you can detect 1 trillion scents. It's crazy, right? You can detect 5 flavors or 5 tastes in 1 trillion scents. And like, why would you have such precision? It's because back long before there was like a food guideline, you had to know, like, I eat this now or I don't eat that, I'm gonna die if I eat that. And you kind of, your body sort of knew what to eat when, and it's all because of your olfactory bulb. We don't have time to talk about it, but that company started as around olfaction and ended up where it is right now.
Okay, so we are getting out of this, your career and your development, but there is something that came to my mind while you were saying this, and this is the olfactory region in your nose and sensations. So how do you think we as human beings are using our olfactory region? Do you think that through evolution we have become more sophisticated, or rather the opposite? I mean,
yes.
Because this goes to the brain, and obviously you feel
so that's a super good question. And I think the reality in science, like over the last 10 years, really since the Nobel Prize in 2004 for this basic discovery of the biology of olfaction, it's a fascinating field. And so the reality is olfaction is super powerful in your life. When people lose their olfactory sense, their lifespan shortens, and that's true in all species, actually. And it's not, it's actually for many reasons, but yes, briefly, your olfactory bulb here, when a scent attaches to an olfactory receptor, it sends an electrical signal to, there's 2 synapses. One jumps to your olfactory bulb. That's an endocrine organ, and it's kind of telling your body. So like when you walk in the street and you smell a croissant, like in your metabolism revs up, and you will go into that bakery and you'll buy and eat more croissant than if you didn't smell it. And those experiments have been done. Right? So if you smell savory food that is hedonically interesting, and then you eat it, you eat more calories than if you don't, actually. And same thing with this sweet food. If you smell a savory and then you eat a sweet, you eat less. So you can hack the olfactory bulb by giving it a signal that it wasn't really anticipating. So olfaction works, but the reality is olfaction is like a feather, and like a big hamburger is like a hammer. And so it's a really subtle scent. And so to be really benefiting from your olfactory sense, you need to kind of be at peace. You need to kind of be, if you're stressed out, you lose olfactory sense. Many things to say here. So I think it's not we don't use our sense of olfaction as much as we could. And by the way, one of your, of course, great chefs, Ferran Adrià, who, and some of you are probably too young to really remember his heyday, but he's an amazing man. And he had 1,848 dishes that he had in his restaurant in El Bulli from the beginning. And he never repeated a meal, and actually a plate. And in his restaurant, he started the 17-course meal. But what's interesting about having lots of really powerful flavors, short duration and then another, is that it actually keeps your olfactory sense stimulated because you get your olfactory sense gets saturated. If you walk into a hotel and you smell whatever the scent is, and it's really powerful for 8 minutes, right? And then you don't smell it anymore. And so what happens is if you eat too much or eat too long one thing, your body is no longer taking in that olfactory sense, and so it kind of derails your metabolism. So we don't use it enough.
I would imagine so. This is a fascinating area, in fact.
Yeah. Mm.
Yes, please.
So I have a question. So we have some students here that are from different fields, and some of them in the background there are from marketing. So are we being tricked by marketing campaigns using olfactory? So how develop this marketing?
Yeah, olfactory marketing. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you are using it for medicine.
Yeah.
For aerosols.
Yeah.
That I was wondering.
Yeah.
What's the level of?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, actually, food companies already have kind of figured out a lot of olfactory signals. I mentioned the fructose issue, and so there's ways in which you can kind of addict people to foods that are actually not good for them. And your olfactory bulb is really set up to do the opposite. It'll normally tell you to stop eating something at a certain point or eat something when you need it, but you can hack it. And so but from what you're thinking of right now are scents that you kind of walk into a store and it makes you buy. And so there are some kind of basic cues that are known. For some period of time in this history of this company, we explored a lot, given what I was just saying, the idea of using olfaction to help sell really high quality coffee or aromatic food that is sort of difficult to access. Spirits are another example where you can give people if you take 8 coffees and you put them in a form of a cloud and you have people smell it, they will choose the most high quality coffee. Right, it's just your nose knows, and the same thing with if you take like 8 scotches, and you'll choose the best. So there's a lot that can be done for now. It is used, but more in a rudimentary sense of what you want to do from an olfactory perspective is to get people buying and kind of loving that buying experience with a certain aroma. A certain scent, and then every time they smell that scent, because what I didn't say is the second leap from the olfactory bulb is your hippocampus. So that a scent is registered in your brain as a memory, and so when you have a really powerful experience, like emotional experience, you've got this scent image. There's no more powerful reminder of that experience than that scent, and so it's can be used. For marketing.
Can be used for marketing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, actually, I would love to have you guys asking questions.
There's one right there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
You need a microphone.
Yes, I can give him mine.
Oh, we have another one. Okay.
Thank
So, yeah, so everybody can hear online too.
Ah, okay.
Oh, you got it?
Yes, hi.
All right. Would it be possible to develop a smell for like a reverse Pavlov effect into quitting bad habits? For example, whenever you want to smoke, you get some type of
Yes.
pill or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So there's a few, from a scientific point of view, there's a few really, really interesting areas for scent, and one is addiction. And so yes, so one of the other, so basically addiction, metabolism, and anxiolytics or fear, anxiety, basically. So on this smoking thing, yes, I don't know if that just came to you, but actually there's this really nice article that was published in Science maybe 13 years ago, and they showed that if smokers at night are exposed while they're sleeping, they're exposed to the smell of a cigarette with some scatological odor, and particularly in the REM phase of sleep. They wake up the next day and they have lost their appetite for cigarettes for 2 weeks. And so there's it's only in that REM phase of sleep, and it could happen any other time of day. So it's really interesting. But in principle, the other thing is true too. You can get kids to eat fruit and vegetables by giving them olfactory experiences for about a month. So yeah.
Okay.
Go on.
And why is it not globally experienced? Is there some limitations to it?
So there's probably a few things that could be said, at least. But one of the things, which is not great, is that kind of a sort of product or intervention is sort of hard to sell or regulate. So it's kind of hard for people to be motivated to do it, because it takes, to make anything that's going to change the world, it takes a lot of money and a lot of regulatory and so forth, but if you've got to be able to monetize it in the end, so that's part of it. I think part of it also is that olfaction is still, even though the science has become much better understood in the last 15 years, it's still really, really artisanal. Kind of before chemistry, there was perfume. And so in a way, if you go into like the big flavor houses and fragrance houses, there's like 3 major ones in the world, and it's amazing. They have just all of this information. And there's a recognition that the world is changing and their world is changing, but there's so much like 3,000 years of history, and you know that it's really hard to bring innovations out basically in this space. And from a healthcare perspective, it's pretty cutting edge. I mean, it's really out there, and it takes so much money to start companies like these that investors are like, aroma, really? And so it's just not made it.
Well, you say it's very difficult, but you know, I don't know if you realize, guys, that this person we have here today, he was professor at Harvard, he's professor at Penn State University, and he has been moving back and forth from industry to academia, or both sides at the same time, but so always changing. And then not only into sciences and teaching, but also, you know, like when you started the Les Laboratoires in France, one day he decided to come to France, and it was at the time of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? That we were together, no?
The which foundation?
Bill and Melinda Gates.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yes. So I was, yes.
Yes.
Yes, we were both had
we
Gates
were both
Grand Challenge.
For the foundation.
Yeah.
And you started that. I remember going to an exhibition that you organized.
Yeah. Well, part of the this is kind of a different topic. I'll run with that. But if there are any questions from students, actually, I'd love to.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be like a really profound question, but anything. I like talking to students. Okay. So yes, thank you.
Hi, you said something about the cultural center in Paris. I read that you have an environment for engineers to create or something like that. What do you do in that culture center?
Yeah, that was about what I was going to talk about. So that's perfect. So so I wrote a book called Art Science. Creativity in the Post-Google Generation. It's a Harvard University book that after I moved to Harvard, anyway, it came out of a lot of my reflection of me and my background, but then a lot of other folks. Anyway, if you look at that book, at the end of it, it imagines that it tells a story of a lot of innovative people who are scientists or architects or medical doctors or musicians, but on the side, they're also like the opposite, and they have this sort of clandestine life where they're like doing this other thing, which is huge for them because it's kind of like they're liberating when they're doing that, and their institutions don't want to know about it. And so we imagine this space called the lab where actually that is all that happened, and we imagine that there anyway that will tell you kind of what we did. And then there's a later book called Creating Things That Matter, which then came at the end of that experience. So to answer your question, we did exhibitions with major artists and designers. And so Philippe Starck, I don't know if you know Philippe Starck, or William Kentridge, or the major names. And we invited them to make mistakes. We basically invited them to go to a frontier of science that they thought was like really cool. And then we would bring like great scientists that could help them navigate that. And so what came out of it were like 20 different exhibitions. There were typically 2 a year. Open to the public. Initially we charged, and eventually it was for free. And from those experiments, lots happened. So William Kentridge's opera around relativity that travels around the world came out of that. And I can still remember William, yeah, the whole story there, it's amazing. Philippe Stark, we invented together a spray, kind of the sort of the prelude to the talk I'll give tomorrow, where so I had invented there something called the whiff, so with a major chef, where you could breathe chocolate, and it would all fall out in your mouth. And then it was like no calories, but it was like all in your mouth, but it was little particles, and so they kind of, you had this amazing experience, but no calories, and so it got a lot of attention, and he came to me and said, but I'd like to be able to give something to somebody else. And so we came up with the idea of a spray, and then he was the artist there, so it was like a vodka, but it was like really, really like cold, like menthol-like, or really, really hot. And it was like so little that it was like no alcohol in you, but you kind of could spray it into your friend's mouth, or you spray it in your own mouth. It was this amazing sort of like instant inebriation that went away, because it was kind of close to your brain, and so you've got this sort of, you feel it, but it's like gone. And so, like the day before we did the exhibition, this Brazilian billionaire bought the whole stock. And so we like just ran out of it. And so we did an exhibition, and then he's a complicated person. I mean, he's not, but he's surrounded by a lot of complicated people, and so it was impossible to go anywhere with that. So it was very experimental, and we had students from Harvard, both in my students and also students of design, who would do residences and who would get involved in these projects. And I'm a big believer that for students, like the best way to learn how to create new things is to create new things and actually fail, right? Like we all do, right? And I present it to somebody, it's not really interested. And so this was an environment where failure was accepted and was even celebrated. And so, yeah, that's what we did.
You are touching that creativity. I also remember when you came to Santiago once, and I said, well, David, you are a scientist. Of course, I know you mainly as a scientist, but you are also an entrepreneur, and you are an artist. I mean, I don't know how many books you have written. I counted 5.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, non-fiction, right?
There's two graphic novels, yeah.
Okay, okay. And I was telling you, how can this be possible? And you told me, this is all about creativity. An artist has to be creative. A scientist has to be creative, right? So.
Yeah, and just to riff on that a little bit, I think what is not so clear, so we did at some point, so I'm going to come back to this, but just to say we did at some point, when we sold this company, we gave a lot of our money away to a foundation to get kids to have these kinds of experiences. And we had this thing that happened called the Art Science Prize, which ended up going to many places. But one of them was in Boston, and so the Boston public schools would get kids together every year, and we'd start with a big event. And we had Aerosmith is from Boston, and so we had one of the lead guitarist or whatever came to speak to the kids. And so I hear all these kids, and he's standing, and he's nervous, and he's like, just, the hands are shaking, and I'm thinking like, everybody's like, worships you, just relax and just talk about. And so he's talking and talking, and then he just puts it down. He said, I'm just going to say this. And so he was trying to do this art science thing, but he said, I'm just going to say, I work really, really, really hard. And I'm having a lot of fun. And what is not understood about people who have this obsessive life where they're kind of doing all this is how fun they're having. Right? So people don't talk about that enough. We talk about kind of all the things we make, but it's like really interesting. You're around people who are really interesting, and they like to take risks. They like to kind of figure, just really interesting. And it's beautiful to discover, yeah.
Of course. I have the feeling that people here in Spain, we don't trust ourselves enough in terms of being creative. When I ask my students about creativity, they seem to be like, oh, well, I'm not sure I can be creative. It's like something that only some people with some special dons are able to do that. And I keep telling them that everybody can be creative.
Yeah,
What is your view of that?
Yeah, totally. I think what we all need is an environment, and so if any of you are really interested in that kind of a life, you you need to find an environment that allows you to experiment and you also need to, one of my first, I taught this class at Harvard for many years called Creating Things That Matter, and I remember this first one class where there was a young woman sitting there, and she said, like, at the end of the first class, so what if I don't have an idea? And, really well educated and couldn't imagine having an idea of filming. I said, that's really crazy in that I have 100 ideas a day. Most of them are bad, right? Most of them are bad. It's like everybody rolls their eyes, but they're just, that doesn't bother me actually. There's something about the idea flow, and I think that's true with, and you need to get into that. Right, and so what happens also, which is amazing, is once you get into the flow, there's no end to it, right? And so you get a lot less possessive of your ideas, because it's like, and so you often find really creative people are like handing ideas out, right? And so that's another thing. You want to be in an environment where people are creative, not just you, right? Because then it's just, there's kind of this atmosphere. And it's true that it can get worked out of you, right? And so if you're in an environment that is not that way, and in most of the world is not that way, right? And so
Yes.
For all the reasons we know, but if you have a chance to be in that environment or even make it yourself, it's worth doing for sure.
I would like to ask a question here. Something that you have actually already mentioned, failure. You're obviously a very successful man. You've accomplished a lot. You've written books. You've taught at the best universities. You've created 2 companies. You're full of ideas. How important has failure been in your career, and how can what
sure.
would you tell students? Because
Yeah.
I think, as you said before, sometimes we're afraid of failure. Failure is demonized.
Yeah.
And I think basically in those creative environments you're talking about, failure is key to success.
Yeah, totally. Well, and this is not just to say it, but it's definitely true that in my work, I have failed way more often than I have succeeded. What is key, and I tell people who are close to me anyway, that at some point in my life, I kind of sort of decided I was not going to fail in projects that I took up. And it was not that I wouldn't fail, I would fail. But I wouldn't accept failure as an end. I would it would be a learning, and I was just going to put so much of myself in this. I'm going to kind of die with this project if this project dies, but I'm not going to let it go. And so once you get the hang of it, then you want to do what you really care about, and I would say others people care about. So when I wrote that book, Creating Things That Matter, it was not what mattered to you, like what matters to everybody else, right? Because if you're working on something that just matters to you, eventually it's kind of extinguishing. So just as an example, in this current company, we're now at the most exciting moment, and I'll talk again about it tomorrow. But my gosh, this was a company that was dead 8 months ago, it was dead 18 months ago, it was dead. There's so many moments where we had an idea, with this idea, but it went this way, and then it went this way, and then this way. And so what you need are people who are around you and who support you, who get that actually it's a process. It may go really quickly, or it may not go quickly. So I think the main thing is just to recognize that if you kind of failed, you guessed something was true and it wasn't, and therefore you discovered something. Yeah. You know
it's a way
something
of learning,
you didn't know.
right? Yeah.
And by the way, this is what I also say to my students. You who are going to be doing more experimenting than we are at this point, you'll fail more often, but your fail will be really personal. It'll be about your world in this moment right now, and so you'll be the biggest expert on that. And so that's yeah.
I'm so sorry. It may be mine.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's always off. I don't know why it's on today. Sorry. So I think we are. Yes,
I think we
have a question there.
Hello. I would like to know that at which age did you found your first company? Because nowadays, sometimes the student feels that if you don't know nothing before 30s,
Yeah.
it's going to be so difficult. And I would like to know at which age did you
thank
found your first
Yeah,
company?
Yeah, so I have a different view on that. I think in the tech world, it's different, right? And so in the tech world, it's kind of the younger you are, the better. But in the world that I'm in, which is definitely healthcare related, even though I've kind of wandered, that's really my field. I was 30 in my 30s, right? And so and what I, say to all of my like undergraduate students and people who really want to kind of pursue a long, innovative career is to get a lot of education, actually. And basically, it's not just that you learn a lot. Actually, you learn to take your time, right? And you learn to get deep. And you can't know what it is to go deep until you have it. But you know what? If you've gone deep into a topic, you immediately know when you meet somebody if they've done that too. Because there's just a kind of a gravity of thinking. And once you start to innovate, the failures are going to just pile up. And if you've got a lot of learning, actually, it's just like, oh, wow, I'm learning all this, and you can kind of really do amazing things. So I wouldn't worry about age. I would just, the main thing about being at your stage, just be doing what you're passionate about, right? And because then you'll care, and you're at an age right now where you have a reason to care. Right, and so it's just do what you're passionate about, and do pay attention, right? Pay attention on what the needs are. It's not like what is making money right now, but it's like what are the issues? And we happen to be in a world with like a lot of issues, so you've got a good. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So maybe one last question.
Bueno, yo ya he preguntado, si alguien quiere preguntar antes.
Aprovechate.
Vale. So we know that smelling salts are used for an enhanced physical performance for over a short period of time. Would there be any treatment for muscle and tissue recovery over an olfactive type?
Yeah, so interesting. So so I think. Yeah, possibly. Let me maybe come back with to you with some more information that will give you a sense of how this works. So one of the most fascinating things that we've discovered, olfactory receptors are the largest subclass of the human genome. And olfactory receptors are not just in your olfactory bulb, they're in your gut, they're in your lungs, they're in your systemic circulation, they're all over your body. And so what we've learned is that there's this communication going on with olfactory receptors. And so if you eat poorly, your gut gets called dysbiotic. You get a kind of your microbes in your gut get sort of out of whack. The olfactory receptors on like T cells in your gut, which are the immune cells that end up going around your body, change. So there's a signature of that dysbiotic gut that goes, and it ends up going to your olfactory bulb, and it actually changes the olfactory receptors in your olfactory bulb. So if you eat badly, your perception of flavor changes. And so you could now start eating well, but you're guided, your nose is guiding you to eat badly, right? And so from a muscle perspective, I don't know that any work's being done in that area. I think that anything that's related to metabolism is really affected a lot by olfaction. And so that conceivably could relate to muscle, but it's kind of indirect. The other area that I didn't talk a lot about was brain and anxiolytics. And so there's a lot of work that goes on in olfaction and neurodegeneration. So when you have neurodegeneration, that's one of the first things that goes. and so there's a lot of work on people who have Alzheimer's or early onset Alzheimer's, exercising their olfactory bulb to slow down the degradation, and that turns out to be really successful. Again, it's a lot of work, but it's helpful. But if you're interested in olfaction, I would think mostly about brain and metabolism.
Okay. So, well, let's ask you a final question, which I would imagine this guy saying, oh, wow, this person has been truly successful. But has it been everything perfect in his life? I mean, is there anything you regret? Of course not.
Yeah.
Nobody, but is there anything you regret you have done and you shouldn't have done?
Well, it's easy to say that there have definitely been really many painful moments in my life, for sure. It's funny, I don't have regrets, and I think it's partly, I am for sure a pioneer, and I'm constantly looking forward. I'm not sure, in a way, the past, once it's the past, is here anymore, and it's not that I don't. It's not that we could put this another way.
Yes.
Should I be regretful for things that have happened in my life? For sure. Yes. I'm sure there's many things that I should be regretful for, and but it doesn't weigh on me. Yeah.
That's a perfect answer, I think.
Anything else? One last. No?
Okay.
Well, what do you guys do? Actually, what are you studying?
There's a combination, a big combination. I think we have engineers here, right? Biomedical.
Okay, I felt that vibe. Yeah.
Marketing guys on the back.
Got it.
What are you guys? Engineers, yeah.
Engineers. All right.
And law.
What
Law
is
as
it?
well.
What's that?
And I think there are few medicals online. Yeah, but I've seen hospital people
I see.
online and medicals.
Got it. All right.
Sorry? Yeah, I was asking. No questions online?
Well, it's really nice to have met you all. Good luck.
Thank you for spending
Yeah,
this
sure.
time with us. Perfect. It was very tiring.
Thank you.
It was very tiring.
Oh, no.